Hannah Thornton adjusted the position of her laptop for the third time, ensuring it was perfectly aligned with the edge of her glass dining table. The morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her downtown apartment caught the polished surface just right, illuminating the carefully curated space she'd spent 5 years perfecting. Every piece had been chosen deliberately. The mid-century modern sofa in charcoal gray, the vintage record collection displayed on custom-built shelves, the abstract paintings she'd saved months to afford. Her apartment wasn't just where she lived. It was proof of what she could build when she put her mind to it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 29, Hannah had learned to find comfort in control. Her graphic design business was thriving, her client roster growing steadily, and she was about to catch a flight to Chicago for the biggest presentation of her career. The tech startup she'd been courting for months had finally agreed to meet about a complete rebrand, a contract that could set her up for the next 2 years. She walked through her apartment one final time, checking that everything was secure. The plants were watered, the mail held, the security system armed. Her neighbor, Mrs. Goldstein, had her spare key for emergencies, and Hannah had left detailed instructions about watering the orchids on the windowsill. It was the kind of meticulous preparation that had become second nature, the same attention to detail that had kept her family afloat for over a decade. The irony wasn't lost on her. While she obsessed over every detail of her own life, she'd spent years cleaning up everyone else's messes without a second thought. The family phone plan she paid for without question, $200 a month because her parents refused to give up their unlimited data, and Zoe insisted she needed the latest iPhone. The car loan she'd co-signed when Zoe was 21 and had absolutely promised to make the payments herself. The countless family events she'd planned, paid for, and coordinated while everyone else showed up and enjoyed themselves. Hannah's phone buzzed as she was double-checking her suitcase. Zoe's name flashed on the screen, and Hannah's stomach immediately tightened. Her sister had been unusually quiet for the past week, which typically meant she was either plotting something or needed money. Usually both. Hey, Han, perfect timing. Zoe's voice carried that particular breathless quality that meant she was walking fast, probably late for something. I know you're super busy with your big Chicago thing, but I need to talk to you about something important, like life-changing important. Hannah lowered herself onto the edge of her bed, already feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. What's going on, Zoe? Okay, so you know how Zoe's Kitchen on Wheels has been struggling a little bit? Well, I figured out exactly what the problem is. I need better equipment, better marketing, maybe a different location strategy. The point is, I found this amazing opportunity to expand, but I need someone to co-sign a loan, just $30,000, which is basically nothing when you think about the potential return on investment. Hannah closed her eyes. She'd seen Zoe's food truck exactly twice in the past 6 months, both times parked outside their parents' house with a closed for repairs sign taped to the window. The business that was supposed to showcase Zoe's culinary creativity had devolved into an expensive hobby that drained money faster than their mother's sympathy. Zoe, when was the last time you actually operated the truck? That's not the point, Hannah. The point is that I'm ready to take it to the next level. I've been doing research, and food trucks are having a major moment right now. All I need is someone who believes in me enough to help me get the financing. Hannah stood up and walked to her window, looking down at the busy street below. People hurried past with purpose, heading to jobs and responsibilities and lives they'd built for themselves. She thought about her own journey. The late nights in college working 3 jobs to pay for design software, the years of building her client base one project at a time, the sacrifices she'd made to get where she was. Zoe, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Have you made any payments on the truck in the past 3 months? The silence stretched long enough that Hannah knew the answer before Zoe finally spoke. I've been having some cash flow issues, but that's exactly why this loan is so important. Once I get the new equipment and really start marketing properly, I'll be able to catch up on everything. I've got it all figured out, Han. I just need someone to believe in me. Hannah felt something shift inside her chest, like a weight she'd been carrying for years, finally becoming too heavy to bear. She'd co-signed for Zoe's car, which Zoe had promptly stopped maintaining. She'd paid for Zoe's phone plan when her sister claimed she couldn't afford the monthly payment. She'd covered Zoe's share of Christmas gifts, birthday celebrations, and emergency expenses without question or complaint. I can't do it, Zoe. The words came out quietly, but they felt thunderous in Hannah's ears. She couldn't remember the last time she'd said no to her family about anything that mattered. What do you mean you can't do it? Hannah, this is my dream we're talking about. This is my chance to finally make something of myself, and you're just going to let me fail because you're too afraid to take a risk? It's not about taking risks. It's about the fact that you haven't made a single payment on the truck you already have. You owe suppliers money. You haven't filed your business taxes properly. I can't put my credit and financial stability on the line for something that isn't working. Wow. Zoe's voice turned cold in a way that Hannah recognized all too well. It was the same tone she'd used when they were kids and Hannah wouldn't let her copy her homework. So this is what success looks like, huh? You get a nice apartment and suddenly you're too good to help your own family? That's not what this is about, isn't it? You've never supported my dreams, Hannah. You've always been jealous that I'm willing to take chances while you play safe with your little design projects. And now that I finally have a real opportunity to build something, you're going to sabotage me because you can't stand the thought of me succeeding? Hannah felt the familiar guilt creeping in, the voice that had been trained into her since childhood telling her that family came first, that Zoe needed support, that saying no made her selfish. But underneath the guilt was something else. A growing anger at being manipulated, at having her genuine concerns dismissed as jealousy. Zoe, I've supported you in every way I could for years. I've co-signed loans, paid bills, planned every family event, and covered expenses without complaining. But I can't keep enabling behavior that isn't working. If you want to make the food truck successful, then make it successful. But do it without putting my financial security at risk. You know what? Fine. I'll figure it out myself, like I always do. But don't expect me to forget this, Hannah. Don't expect me to forget that when I really needed my sister, you chose money over family. The line went dead, leaving Hannah staring at her phone with a mixture of relief and dread. She'd finally said no, but she knew it wouldn't end there. It never did with Zoe. Her phone immediately rang again, this time showing her mother contact information. Hannah almost didn't answer, but Carol Thornton's persistence was legendary. Hannah, sweetie, Zoe just called me crying. She said you refused to help her with an important business loan? Hannah sat back down on her bed, suddenly feeling exhausted. Mom, the loan is for $30,000. Zoe hasn't made payments on her current truck in months, and she owes suppliers money. It's not a good financial decision. But she's trying so hard to make something of herself. You know how much this means to her. And $30,000 isn't that much money for someone in your position. It's not about the amount, Mom. It's about the pattern. Zoe needs to learn to be accountable for her own decisions. Hannah, I'm disappointed in you. I raised you to care about family, to support each other. This isn't the daughter I know.
The guilt trip was expertly delivered, honed by decades of practice. But for the first time, Hannah felt more frustrated than guilty. I'll call you when I get back from Chicago, Mom. Hannah hung up and finished packing in silence, her mind churning. She'd spent so many years being the responsible one, the problem solver, the family safety net, that she'd never stopped to question whether it was fair or sustainable. She'd built a successful business, bought her own apartment, created a life she was proud of, and yet she was still expected to sacrifice her financial security for Zoe's latest failed venture. As her Uber pulled up outside her building, Hannah grabbed her suitcase and laptop bag, taking one last look around her apartment. Everything was perfect, ordered, secure. In 48 hours, she'd be back with hopefully good news from Chicago and the promise of financial stability for years to come. She had no way of knowing that by the time she returned, everything she'd worked to build would be in ruins. The conference room on the 34th floor of the Meridian Tower offered a stunning view of Lake Michigan, but Hannah found herself more focused on the three executives seated across from her. Marcus Chen, the CEO of Nexus Technologies, leaned back in his leather chair while his marketing director, Sarah Williams, flipped through Hannah's portfolio with obvious interest. The third member of their team, CTO David Park, had been asking increasingly detailed questions about implementation timelines and brand consistency across platforms. "The visual identity you've proposed really captures what we're trying to communicate," Sarah said, holding up one of Hannah's mock-ups. "It's clean, modern, but still approachable, not too corporate." Hannah felt a familiar rush of satisfaction. This was what she'd worked for, the moment when years of building her skills and reputation converged into something that could change her career trajectory. The Nexus Technologies rebrand would be her biggest contract to date, and from the questions they were asking, it seemed like they were ready to move forward. "We'd want to start with the logo and core brand elements, then roll out across all digital platforms before the product launch in 6 months. The timeline is aggressive, but the budget reflects that urgency." They spent another hour discussing details, timelines, and expectations. By the time Hannah left the building, she had a signed letter of intent and the promise of a formal contract within the week. The payment schedule would cover her expenses for the next 18 months, allowing her to be selective about additional projects and maybe even hire a junior designer to help with the workload. She celebrated with dinner at a small Italian restaurant near her hotel, allowing herself a glass of wine and the luxury of imagining how this success would change her life. Financial security meant freedom, the freedom to turn down projects that didn't excite her, to invest in better equipment, and maybe even to start thinking about buying a house instead of renting. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alex Rivera, her best friend since college. "How did it go? I'm dying to hear." Hannah typed back quickly. "Better than I hoped. I think I just landed the biggest contract of my career." Alex's response was immediate. "Hannah, that's incredible. We're celebrating when you get back." As Hannah walked back to her hotel, she felt lighter than she had in months. The stress of the presentation was behind her, the contract was basically secured, and for the first time in years, she'd set a boundary with her family and stuck to it. Maybe things were finally falling into place. 300 miles away in her parents' basement, Zoe Thornton stared at her phone screen with a mixture of rage and determination. Hannah's Instagram story showed a perfectly plated dinner and a glass of wine, with the caption, "Celebrating in Chicago." The image was everything Zoe resented about her sister: the effortless success, the financial freedom, the ability to travel for work and stay in nice hotels. Zoe had spent the afternoon scrolling through Hannah's social media, each post a reminder of the growing gap between their lives. Hannah's apartment tours showcasing her perfectly curated space. Hannah's professional achievements documented in client testimonials and portfolio updates. Hannah's carefully planned vacations and weekend getaways. Meanwhile, Zoe was 24 years old, living in her parents' basement, watching her food truck business collapse one unpaid bill at a time. "You look like you're plotting someone's murder," Tyler Matthews said from the couch where he'd been scrolling his own phone for the past hour. His guitar leaned against the wall, abandoned after an hour of half-hearted practice. Tyler had been working on his music as long as Zoe had known him, but his idea of work mostly involved posting videos on TikTok and complaining how the industry didn't appreciate real talent. "My sister just posted about celebrating her big business success while I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to pay my truck insurance," Zoe said, not looking up from her phone. Tyler moved to sit beside her on the bed, glancing at Hannah's Instagram over her shoulder. "Man, your sister really does have it all figured out, doesn't she? Nice apartment, successful business, probably makes more in a month than I make in a year." She acts like she's so much better than everyone else, like she earned everything through hard work, while the rest of us are just lazy. But you know what? She's had every advantage. She got to go to college without working 3 jobs because I was too young to contribute to household expenses. She got her start in design because she could afford to take unpaid internships. She didn't have to support anyone else while she was building her career. Tyler nods sympathetically, though Zoe noticed he wasn't really listening. He was studying Hannah's apartment in the background of her photos with the kind of attention he usually reserved for expensive guitars he couldn't afford. You know what really gets me? Zoe continued, her voice rising. She could have helped me save my business with that loan, but she chose her precious financial security over her own sister's dreams. She has everything, and she still couldn't spare $30,000 to help family. That's really messed up, Tyler agreed, though his tone was distracted. Hey, when's she getting back from Chicago? Tomorrow night. Why? Tyler was quiet for a moment, that calculating expression crossing his face that Zoe recognized as trouble. I'm just thinking, maybe it's time your sister learned what it feels like to lose something she cares about. Zoe looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean, she's always so perfect, so in control. Her apartment is like a museum, right? Everything in its place, everything exactly how she wants it. What if something happened to mess that up while she was gone? Tyler, I'm not going to break into my sister's apartment. I'm not talking about breaking in. You have a key, right? For emergencies? Zoe did have a key. Hannah had given it to her 2 years ago when she'd first bought the apartment, along with detailed instructions about watering plants and collecting mail during longer trips. The key was meant to be used responsibly for actual emergencies, but technically, that would be crazy, Zoe said, but Tyler could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Would it? She just screwed over your business, Zoe. She chose her stuff over your dreams. Maybe she needs to understand what it feels like to have something important to her destroyed. The idea was taking shape in Zoe's mind, fed by months of resentment and Tyler's validation of her anger. Hannah had always been the golden child, the responsible one, the success story. Maybe it was time for her to experience some chaos, some unpredictability, some of the uncertainty that Zoe lived with every day. Just a small gathering, Zoe said slowly. A few friends. Nothing too crazy. Tyler's grin widened. Exactly. Just enough to shake things up a little. Show her that not everyone lives in a museum. Across town, Jordan Kim was editing social media content for their marketing firm when Zoe's text came through. Want to be part of something epic tomorrow night? Hannah's out of town, and I'm thinking we shake up her perfect little world a bit. Jordan stared at the message, already feeling a knot forming in their stomach. They'd known Zoe since college, had watched her cycle through relationships, jobs, and creative pursuits with equal enthusiasm and equal inability to see things through. But this felt different. This felt like revenge. Jordan typed back, "What are you talking about?" Hannah's been acting like she's too good to help family. Time she learned what it feels like to lose control of something important to her. Zoe, that sounds like a really bad idea. Come on, Jay. You've seen how she treats me. How she treats all of us, really. Always judging, always acting superior. One night of mess in her precious apartment won't kill her. Jordan knew they should say no, should talk Zoe out of whatever she was planning, but they also knew that Zoe had been struggling, that the food truck failure was hitting her hard, and that Hannah's refusal to help with the loan had genuinely hurt her. Maybe Zoe was right that Hannah needed to understand what it felt like to lose something important. Just promise me nothing gets permanently damaged, Zoe typed. Promise. Just a little chaos. She'll clean it up and move on, but maybe she'll think twice about abandoning family next time. Jordan agreed to meet Zoe the next evening, already dreading what they were signing up for, but unable to abandon their friend when she was clearly struggling. They told themselves it would be harmless, just a small gathering that would maybe teach Hannah a lesson about taking people for granted. Neither Jordan nor Zoe had factored Tyler's idea of a few friends into their plans.
Mrs. Goldstein was taking her evening walk when she noticed the unfamiliar young man hanging around the entrance to Hannah's building. She'd lived in the neighborhood for 40 years and had developed an eye for people who didn't belong. The man, early 20s, unkempt hair, wearing clothes that looked like he'd slept in them, was clearly casing the building, studying the entrance and checking his phone repeatedly. She made a mental note to mention it to Hannah when she returned from her trip, then continued her walk. Mrs. Goldstein had become protective of Hannah over the years, watching the young woman work late into the night building her business, always polite, but clearly struggling with some kind of family drama that occasionally played out in heated phone conversations audible through the thin walls. As she rounded the corner, Mrs. Goldstein saw the young man make a phone call. Though she couldn't hear the conversation, his gestures and expression suggested he was reporting back to someone about what he'd observed. She made another mental note and quickened her pace back to her apartment, where she planned to keep a closer eye on Hannah's building for the next few days. Something was definitely being planned, and Mrs. Goldstein had learned to trust her instincts about these things. Friday evening arrived with an unseasonable warmth that had people opening windows and spilling out onto sidewalks across the city. Hannah was having dinner with her Chicago client team, finalizing details of their contract and discussing launch timelines over craft cocktails and artisanal flatbreads. She posted a quick photo to her Instagram stories, the restaurant's elegant interior, her notebook filled with project details, a caption about dreams becoming reality. 200 miles away, Zoe stood outside Hannah's building, holding her sister's spare key and fighting a growing sense of unease. The afternoon had been spent gathering supplies, speakers for music, a few bottles of wine, some snacks. She'd told herself it would be a small gathering, maybe 6 or 8 people, just enough to mess up Hannah's perfectly organized space and make a point about taking family for granted. But Tyler had spent the day making calls and sending texts, and now Zoe was looking at a group that had swelled to nearly 15 people, most of whom she barely knew. Tyler's rapper friends from the studio had shown up with their own alcohol and what looked suspiciously like spray paint cans. Jordan stood nervously beside her, clearly having second thoughts about the whole plan. "This is a lot more people than we talked about," Jordan whispered as they waited for the elevator. "It'll be fine," Zoe said, though she was beginning to doubt her own words. "We're just going to have some fun, make some art, show Hannah what real creativity looks like." The elevator ride to the 8th floor was cramped and loud, with Tyler's friends already drinking and joking about showing some uptight designer what a real party looks like. Zoe felt her stomach tighten as she realized how quickly this was spiraling beyond her control, but her anger at Hannah's refusal to help with the loan overrode her caution. Hannah's apartment was exactly as Zoe remembered, immaculate, sophisticated, every piece of furniture and decoration chosen with careful thought. The living room featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, custom bookshelves lined with design magazines and carefully curated art books, a vintage record collection displayed on floating shelves. The dining table was a restored mid-century piece that Hannah had spent months hunting for at estate sales. "Damn, your sister does live like she's better than everyone else," Tyler said, running his hands over the leather sofa. "Look at this place, it's like a showroom. That's the point. Everything perfect, everything in its place. No room for spontaneity or real life." Tyler's friend Marcus, a wannabe rapper who went by the stage name M-Dog, was already setting up a portable speaker system that looked capable of shaking the entire building. "This place needs some life in it, some soul, some real artistic expression." Jordan pulled Zoe aside as the group began spreading out through the apartment. "Zoe, I really think we should keep this small. Just a few people, make a little mess, prove your point, and get out." "Relax, Jay. It's one night. Hannah will clean it up and move on, but maybe she'll think twice about abandoning family next time." But as Zoe spoke, she watched Marcus examining Hannah's record collection with obvious disdain. "Look at this pretentious crap," he said loudly, pulling out a vintage jazz album. "Your sister probably doesn't even listen to half this stuff. It's just for show." "Be careful with those," Zoe said, but Marcus was already handling the records roughly, flipping through them with careless fingers. Tyler had found Hannah's liquor cabinet and was passing around an expensive bottle of whiskey that Hannah had been saving for special occasions. To artistic freedom, he announced, raising the bottle in a mock toast, and to teaching uptight people what real creativity looks like. The party escalated quickly from there. What had started as a small gathering of friends became something else entirely, as Tyler's connections brought in additional people throughout the evening. Strangers appeared in Anna's living room, people who had no connection to Zoe or her grievances against Hannah, who saw only an opportunity for free alcohol and a space where normal rules didn't apply. Mrs. Goldstein first noticed the noise around 9:30. Bass thumping through the walls, voices getting progressively louder, the sound of furniture being moved around. She put on her robe and stepped into the hallway, where the music was even more apparent. Other neighbors were beginning to poke their heads out of their apartments, looking concerned and annoyed. She knocked on Hannah's door, planning to ask them to turn down the music, but got no response. The building's security guard, Jim Morrison, appeared a few minutes later after receiving multiple noise complaints. "I've got a key for maintenance purposes," he explained to Mrs. Goldstein, "but I can't just walk in unless there's an emergency." "That music is loud enough to be an emergency," Mrs. Goldstein replied firmly. "And I don't think Hannah authorized this. She's in Chicago for work." Inside the apartment, the party had taken on a life of its own. Someone had started spray painting graffiti on Hannah's accent wall, covering her carefully chosen paint color with crude artistic statements about bourgeois conformity and fake success. The living room furniture had been rearranged to create a makeshift dance floor, with Hannah's coffee table shoved against the windows and her reading chair turned over. Zoe found herself paralyzed by the destruction unfolding around her. This wasn't what she had intended. She'd wanted to mess things up a little, to force Hannah to deal with some chaos for once, but watching strangers destroy her sister's carefully curated space felt wrong in a way she hadn't anticipated. "Tyler, this is getting out of hand," she said, grabbing his arm as he encouraged someone to use Hannah's dining table as a surface for mixing drinks. "People are damaging things." "Relax, babe. Your sister's got insurance, right? Besides, look how happy everyone is. This is what real joy looks like, not that sterile museum she calls home." But even as Tyler spoke, Zoe could see that several of Hannah's art pieces had been knocked off the walls, their frames cracked. Someone had spilled red wine across the white rug that Hannah had saved for months to buy. The kitchen was a disaster zone of broken glass and spilled liquor. Jordan appeared beside her, phone in hand. "Zoe, I've been recording some of this to show you how out of control it's gotten. We need to shut this down." I know. But how? Half these people I don't even know, and they're not listening to me." Marcus had discovered Hannah's record collection and was now throwing albums around like frisbees, laughing as they shattered against the walls. Decades of carefully collected vinyl, some of it rare, all of it meaningful to Hannah, destroyed in moments of thoughtless destruction. "Stop!" Zoe finally shouted, but her voice was lost in the music and chaos. Building security arrived at 10:15, accompanied by Mrs. Goldstein and 2 police officers responding to noise complaints. The sight that greeted them was shocking. Hannah's pristine apartment transformed into a disaster zone. Strangers dancing on furniture, graffiti covering the walls, broken glass everywhere. "This party is over," Officer Martinez announced, his voice cutting through the noise. "Everyone out now." The exodus was chaotic and swift. Tyler's friends grabbed their speakers and disappeared down the stairwell, leaving behind empty bottles and spray paint cans as evidence of their presence. Within 15 minutes, the apartment was empty except for Zoe, Jordan, and the devastating aftermath of what had been intended as a small statement about Hannah's priorities. Zoe stood in the middle of the destruction, finally understanding the full scope of what she'd unleashed. This wasn't just mess that could be cleaned up. This was thousands of dollars in damage to furniture, art, and electronics that represented years of Hannah's work and saving. "Zoe, what have we done?" Jordan whispered, documenting the damage with their phone camera, though they weren't sure why. Zoe pulled out a piece of paper and wrote quickly, "Now we're even for all the times you said no. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to lose something you care about. Z. She left the note on Hannah's overturned coffee table and followed Jordan out of the apartment, her hands shaking as she locked the door behind her. The hallway was quiet now, but she could feel Mrs. Goldstein's eyes on her through the peephole of her own apartment. As they waited for the elevator, Zoe realized that her act of revenge had accomplished something she hadn't intended. It had shown her exactly how far she was willing to go to hurt someone she claimed to love. And the answer was further than she'd ever imagined possible. The elevator doors closed on the wreckage of Hannah's life, and Zoe began to understand that some actions couldn't be undone, no matter how justified they'd seemed in the moment. Hannah's key turned in the lock at 11:30 Saturday night, her mind still buzzing with excitement from the successful Chicago trip. The contract was signed, her biggest client secured, and she was already planning how to invest the advance payment. She pushed open the door and reached for the light switch, expecting to see her pristine living room. Instead, she stepped into a nightmare. The stench hit her first: stale alcohol, cigarette smoke, and something sour she couldn't identify. Her white rug was stained dark red with wine, her leather sofa slashed and stuffing spilling out. The custom bookshelves she'd commissioned were overturned, her carefully curated art books scattered and torn. Her grandmother's vintage record collection, irreplaceable albums she'd inherited and treasured, lay shattered across the hardwood floor. Hannah stood frozen in the doorway, her suitcase dropping from numb fingers. Graffiti covered her accent wall in crude, angry letters: "Live a little" and "Fake success." Her dining table, the mid-century piece she'd spent months hunting for, was scratched and stained with ring marks from bottles and glasses. Her hands shaking, she pulled out her phone and began documenting the destruction, room by room. The kitchen was a disaster zone of broken glass and spilled liquor. Her bedroom had been invaded, her jewelry box ransacked, a necklace missing. Everywhere she looked, years of careful saving and thoughtful curation had been destroyed in a single night of chaos. Then she found the note, crumpled on her overturned coffee table. "Now we're even her all the times you said no. Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to lose something you care about. Z." She left the note on her damaged coffee table and sank onto her damaged sofa, the note trembling in her hands. This wasn't random vandalism or a break-in. This was deliberate, calculated revenge from her own sister. The woman she'd supported, protected, and enabled for years had orchestrated the destruction of everything Hannah had worked to build. Mrs. Goldstein's gentle knock interrupted her shock. "Hannah, dear, I saw your light come on. I have some things to show you." Sunday dinner at her parents' house felt like walking into an ambush. Hannah sat at the familiar table, her laptop open to photos of the destruction, while her family listened with varying degrees of discomfort and denial. "It's just stuff, Hannah," Carl said, barely glancing at the images. "Material possessions can be replaced." Zoe was expressing her pain. "Mom, she destroyed $15,000 worth of furniture and art. She violated my home, my privacy, my trust." Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding eye contact. "Can't we all just move past this? I'm sure Zoe didn't mean for things to get out of hand." Zoe sat across from Hannah, arms crossed defensively. "Maybe now you know how it feels to be disappointed by family. You abandoned me when I needed help most." Hannah stared at her sister, searching for any sign of remorse or accountability. Instead, she saw only justification and victim mentality. "Zoe, I said no to one loan. You responded by destroying my home. Your precious apartment isn't more important than my dreams. You've always been selfish, always putting your stuff before people." Carl reached across the table, her voice pleading. "Hannah, you've got insurance, don't you? And your business is doing so well. Surely this isn't worth destroying our family over." The assumption that Hannah's success made her responsible for absorbing everyone else's mistakes finally broke something inside her. She'd spent years being the reasonable one, the problem solver, the family safety net. But looking around this table,
She realized that none of them saw her as a person deserving respect, only as a resource to be exploited. "You're right, Mom," Hannah said quietly, closing her laptop. "This isn't worth destroying our family over." But apparently, our family was already destroyed, and I was just too busy fixing everyone else's problems to notice. She gathered her things and stood. "I won't be coming to family dinners anymore. I won't be planning Dad's birthday party or organizing Christmas gifts. I won't be available to bail anyone out or solve anyone's crises. Consider this my resignation from being the family safety net." The silence that followed her announcement was deafening. Monday morning, Hannah sat in Alex Rivera's office, her best friend's marketing firm bustling with activity around them. Alex had cleared her schedule to help Hannah process the weekend's events and plan her response. "I can't believe they're making you the villain in this," Alex said, reviewing the photos Hannah had taken. "Zoe destroys your home, and your mother's worried about insurance claims." "That's the pattern, Alex. I've been enabling it for years without realizing it. Every time I fix their problems, I'm teaching them that actions don't have consequences." Alex leaned forward, her expression serious. "So, what are you going to do?" Hannah pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her contacts. "I'm going to make us truly even. If Zoe wants to know what it feels like to lose something important, she's about to find out." Her first call was to the cell phone company. "I'd like to cancel the family plan I've been paying for. Yes, all 4 lines except mine. Effective immediately." Within hours, her family's phones were disconnected. Carl called from a neighbor's phone, panicked and confused. "Hannah, our phones aren't working. There must be some mistake." "No mistake, Mom. I decided to stop paying for services I don't use." Next, Hannah visited her bank to begin the process of removing herself from Zoe's car loan. The process would take 30 days, but once complete, Zoe would be solely responsible for payments she'd been ignoring for months. The final step was the hardest. Hannah opened her laptop and began typing an email to her parents. "I will not be planning your anniversary party this year. After 30 years of marriage, I believe you're capable of organizing your own celebration." Her phone immediately rang. Richard's voice was strained, desperate. "Hannah, I don't know how to plan a party. Your mother and we've never done anything like that. We need you." For the first time, Hannah heard her father admit how much he'd depended on her work, her organization, her unpaid labor. The revelation was both validating and heartbreaking. "Dad, I've been planning family events since I was 16. Maybe it's time you learned." The backlash was swift and predictable. Carl showed up at Hannah's apartment Tuesday evening, tears streaming down her face. "You're punishing all of us for what Zoe did. The phone bills, the anniversary party. We're a family."
By Wednesday, Richard was calling twice daily, his panic escalating. "Hannah, the anniversary party is in 3 weeks. We've invited 30 people. Your mother's counting on this being special." "Then make it special, Dad. Hire a caterer, rent a venue. Do what adults do when they want to celebrate something important." Zoe tried a different approach, showing up at Hannah's office Thursday afternoon with red-rimmed eyes and a trembling voice. "Hannah, my car's about to be repossessed. The bank says you're removing yourself from the loan. Please, I'll lose my job without transportation." "You stopped making payments 3 months ago, Zoe. This is a natural consequence." "But I'm trying to get back on track. Tyler and I broke up. I'm focusing on real work now. Please don't abandon me when I'm finally trying to change." Hannah studied her sister's face, looking for genuine remorse or accountability. Instead, she saw manipulation tactics perfected over decades of practice. "If you're serious about change, Zoe, then change. Get a second job to pay your car note. Find roommates to split expenses. Ask Mom and Dad for help instead of assuming I'll always be there to fix your mistakes." That evening, Jordan Kim sent Hannah a text. "I have something you need to see. Can we meet?" Jordan met Hannah at a coffee shop downtown, their laptop bag heavy with evidence they'd been carrying for days. Their conscience had finally overridden their loyalty to Zoe. "I recorded most of the party," Jordan said, opening their laptop. I thought it would be harmless fun, but watching this back, Hannah, I'm so sorry. We planned this. It wasn't spontaneous. The videos were damning. Zoe and Tyler discussing their creative awakening party specifically designed to mess up Hannah's museum. Tyler encouraging escalation, bringing in additional people, actively promoting destruction. Most importantly, clear footage of Zoe leaving her note, proving premeditation. There's more, Jordan continued, showing Hannah text message screenshots. Tyler's been bragging about it to his friends. He's posted videos on social media calling it artistic justice and teaching rich people humility. Hannah studied the evidence, her anger shifting from hot rage to cold determination. This wasn't a mistake or an accident. It was calculated revenge, documented and celebrated by its perpetrators. Mrs. Goldstein had also been busy. The retired librarian had compiled a detailed timeline of events, complete with building security footage and witness statements from other neighbors. She'd treated the investigation like a research project, and her documentation was thorough and damning. "I've been watching your family dynamics for 2 years," Mrs. Goldstein told Hannah over tea in her apartment. "What they did to you was wrong, but it's part of a pattern. You've been carrying them, and they've been taking advantage." Unexpectedly, Hannah's aunt called that evening. Linda Thornton had always been the black sheep of the family, living across the country and maintaining minimal contact with her siblings. "I heard about what happened through the family grapevine," Linda said. "I wanted you to know that some of us have been watching this dysfunction for years. Your grandparents would be proud of you for finally setting boundaries. Not everyone in this family thinks you're the villain, Hannah." The validation from extended family members who'd stayed silent for years was both comforting and infuriating. How many people had watched her family exploit her labor and kindness without speaking up? 2 weeks after Hannah's withdrawal began, the consequences reached critical mass. Zoe's car was repossessed on a Tuesday morning, towed from her workplace parking lot in front of her coworkers. Her employer, already aware of the apartment incident through Tyler's social media posts, placed her on probation pending a review of her judgment and professional conduct. Richard and Carol's anniversary planning had devolved into chaos. They'd booked a venue, but forgotten about catering, decorations, music, or any of the dozens of details Hannah typically managed seamlessly. Family members were calling confused about logistics no one had organized. Hannah agreed to one final family meeting, but this time the rules were different. She brought Alex for support and Jordan's evidence for documentation. The meeting would happen in a neutral location, a conference room Alex had booked at her office. "This is about accountability and changed behavior," Hannah announced as her family filed in, looking defensive and desperate. "Not negotiation or compromise." She presented Jordan's videos methodically, watching her parents' faces change as they realized the extent of premeditation involved. Zoe's text messages planning the artistic statement, Tyler's social media posts celebrating the destruction, the clear documentation of deliberate, calculated revenge. "You told me it was just artistic expression," Carol whispered to Zoe. "You said things got out of hand accidentally." "I was angry," Zoe protested. "Hannah abandoned me when I needed help most." "I said no to one loan," Hannah replied calmly. "Your response was to organize a party specifically designed to destroy my home and possessions. These aren't equivalent actions." Richard was studying the financial breakdown Hannah had prepared, the real cost of the damage, the insurance deductible she'd have to pay, the irreplaceable items that couldn't be restored or replaced. "Richard, Hannah, what do you want from us?" he asked finally. "I want Zoe to take full responsibility for the damage she caused. I want Mom to stop making excuses for destructive behavior. And I want all of you to understand that I will never again be available as the family cleanup crew." The ultimatum was clear. Genuine accountability and changed behavior, or Hannah would maintain no contact permanently. 6 months later, Hannah stood in her restored apartment, surveying the space she'd rebuilt from the ground up. The new furniture was more practical, more durable. The walls featured art from local artists rather than expensive pieces that couldn't be restored or replaced. Her record collection was smaller, but more meaningful, focused on albums she actually listened to rather than display pieces. The apartment looked different, but it felt stronger, like her. Richard had surprised everyone by entering therapy and making genuine efforts to understand his role in the family dysfunction. His first real apology had come 3 months after the confrontation, along with a commitment to learn the skills he'd never developed because Hannah had always handled everything. "I let you carry burdens that weren't yours to carry," he told her during their first reconciliation conversation. "I was ashamed of my own limitations, so I let you compensate for them instead of addressing them myself." Carol's progress was slower, but she'd begun attending Al-Anon meetings for families of addictive behaviors, recognizing her enabling patterns were destructive regardless of their motivation. Zoe remained largely unchanged. She'd paid a portion of the damages after her parents insisted, but she'd never offered a genuine apology or taken full responsibility for her actions. She worked at a restaurant now, having lost her previous job after the social media scandal, and lived with a roommate in a small apartment across town. Hannah had accepted that some relationships couldn't be repaired, only managed with appropriate boundaries. Mrs. Goldstein had become like a grandmother to Hannah, their weekly tea appointments a highlight of both their weeks. She also introduced Hannah to David, a teacher who appreciated Hannah's independence rather than feeling threatened by it. "You know what I learned?" Hannah told Alex over drinks one evening. "Being even wasn't about revenge or getting them back. It was about stopping the unequal giving. It was about recognizing that I'd been participating in my own exploitation by enabling their dysfunction." Her business was thriving. The Nexus Technology rebrand had led to 3 additional major contracts, and she'd hired 2 junior designers to help manage the workload. Financial security had given her the freedom to choose projects based on interest rather than desperation. Most importantly, Hannah had learned to distinguish between family that loved her and family that used her. The people who remained in her life after she set boundaries were the ones worth keeping. The ones who disappeared when she stopped being useful had revealed their true priorities. True family, she reflected, isn't about blood relations or shared history. It's about people who love and respect you enough to want your success and happiness, not just your services. The notification chimed on Hannah's phone as she reviewed design mock-ups for her latest client, a sustainable fashion startup launching their fall collection. She glanced at the screen and saw an Instagram message from someone named @TruthTellerTanya. "Your story changed my life. Thank you for showing me I wasn't crazy." Hannah had been getting messages like this for months, ever since her blog post about family boundaries had gone viral. What started as a personal reflection on her experience with Zoe had resonated with thousands of people struggling with similar dynamics. The post, titled "The Cost of Being the Family Safety Net," had been shared across social media platforms, generating hundreds of comments from people who recognized their own stories in Hannah's words. She opened her laptop and scrolled through the latest comments on her blog. Sarah from Minnesota wrote about finally refusing to plan her sister's 3rd wedding after the previous 2 had left her bankrupt from covering costs. Michael from Texas described setting boundaries with parents who expected him to financially support their retirement while they continued making poor financial decisions. Emma from Portland shared her story of moving across the country to escape a family that treated her like an unpaid therapist and personal assistant. The response had been so overwhelming that Hannah had started a monthly support group for people dealing with family exploitation. What started as a small gathering in Mrs. Goldstein's community center had grown into a structured program with guest speakers, resource sharing, and genuine healing. Dr. Patricia Williams, a family therapist specializing in boundary setting, had become a regular facilitator after reading Hannah's initial post. "The pattern is remarkably consistent," Dr. Williams had explained during their first professional consultation. "Families often unconsciously designate one."
The ripple effect of Hannah's decision to set boundaries had extended far beyond her immediate family. Jordan had left their toxic marketing job and started freelancing, building a client base that valued their skills rather than exploiting their people-pleasing tendencies. Mrs. Goldstein had begun sharing her own story of setting boundaries with adult children who expected unlimited financial support. Even David, Hannah's boyfriend, had been inspired to address his own family dynamics after witnessing Hannah's transformation. Hannah's business had evolved as well. She'd become increasingly selective about clients.
turning down projects that involved working with people who didn't respect professional boundaries. Her portfolio was smaller but more prestigious, and her rates had doubled as her confidence grew. The financial success felt different than before. It wasn't just about proving her worth anymore, but about building sustainable prosperity that couldn't be compromised by family obligations. The support group met that evening in the community center, a circle of 15 people ranging in age from 22 to 68. Hannah listened as newcomers shared their stories. A teacher whose siblings expected her to pay for family vacations she couldn't afford, a nurse whose parents demanded free medical advice while dismissing her professional expertise, a contractor whose family treated his tools and truck like community property. The hardest part, shared Maria, a social worker dealing with boundary issues with her extended family, is accepting that some people will never change. My sister still calls me selfish for refusing to babysit her kids every weekend, but I've realized that her opinion of me isn't my responsibility to manage. Dr. Williams nodded approvingly. That's a crucial insight, Maria. We can't control other people's reactions to our boundaries. We can only control whether we maintain them consistently. As the meeting concluded, Hannah reflected on how much her life had changed since that devastating night when she discovered her destroyed apartment. The physical damage had been repaired within months, but the emotional healing had taken much longer. She'd learned to distinguish between healthy family dynamics and dysfunctional exploitation, between supporting loved ones and enabling destructive behavior. Most importantly, she discovered that being even with her family didn't require scorekeeping or revenge. It required honest assessment of relationship dynamics and the courage to demand reciprocal respect. Some relationships had survived this recalibration and emerged stronger. Others had ended or remained distant, but that outcome reflected their true nature rather than creating artificial harmony through one-sided sacrifice. Walking home through the city streets, Hannah passed her old building where Mrs. Goldstein still lived. The elderly woman had become more than a neighbor or ally. She'd become chosen family, proof that meaningful relationships could be built on mutual care rather than obligatory blood ties. Hannah's apartment now felt like home in a way it never had before, not because it was perfect or pristine, but because it represented boundaries maintained, self-respect restored, and a life built on authentic relationships. She'd learned that true family wasn't about who shared your DNA, but about who celebrated your success, respected your limits, and valued your well-being over their convenience. The cost of being the family safety net had been her own emotional and financial security. The price of setting boundaries had been some relationships that couldn't survive honesty, but the reward, a life lived on her own terms, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her happiness, had been worth every difficult conversation and uncomfortable truth. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.